Well, I had an email from somebody. He was talking about loading for a Mosin using one of the basic Lee loaders, the old classics. And he was thinking, to load up some cheap to shoot, relatively mild loads, which is nice to be able to do. But he was concerned about length, case length. I always consider these to be a very practical thing, and you'll get really long case life out of your brass if you actually use these, because they just resize the neck. It works great as long as it's going back into the same gun it was shot out of. Sometimes, like I've got a half dozen Mosins, 3 of them I can kind of interchange the brass, but it's a little, tough. Sometimes they don't really want to chamber smooth. It's better if you put them back in the same that you have. But they're a good practical deal. They've got to be, I think, around $37 now. Well, I got the catalog here. I could actually look, but they're getting to be more limited into what's available, more so all the time. Well, I won't spend too much time searching in here. Yeah, $39.98 now. And when it used to be about 20 bucks. And they don't have nearly the calibers that they used to have. But they do still carry the one for the Mosin. Anyway, his concern was with case length. If you really need to trim your brass, which you do after a while, but if you're shooting relatively mild loads, it'll go for a long time. You don't get a lot of stretch, particularly if you're just neck sizing them. Once they're sized to the chamber, the brass isn't going to get exercised that much. Now, the tool that I have to do it is this Lyman one. This works good, particularly if you're doing a whole bunch of them, because it's easy to chuck something in. You just have to change pilots for every different caliber, and then you just crank it. It's got a carbide cutter, and it'll stop if you get the setting right. It'll stop at that length, but every time you change to a different cartridge, well, then you have to readjust that. I got it because it was a place going out of business, and I got it really cheap. There's a lot of ways of doing this. In fact, before I ever had that, I used to just file them. If they got too long, I'd file the end of them. You could do it with emery paper or anything. But like I say, you don't really get, unless you're running maximum type loads, you don't get a lot of stretch out of them. But if I was going to do it again, well, first I would say, more important than anything, you have to know where you're at. That's where a caliper is really important. And now, calipers aren't expensive. You can get a decent one for around $20. The digital ones could even be cheaper. And some of them have plastic frames that will even be cheaper. You don't need it to be really precise, but you need something. In fact, they make that kind of a card that's a gauge that it's either a go or no go type thing. I've never used one, but I think that would work too. But the thing is, you got to know if you're too long, because you don't want to get so long that it's up there getting pinched in the chamber. But if I was going to do it again, particularly like in his instance where he's only going to be loading that one cartridge, I would go with the Lee method. You could buy this set, which is a good set to have, is around $13. Yeah, $12.98 here. Well, that gives you this for chamfering the case mouth, well, both inside and outside, and these are a handy tool to have. You know, so to get it as part of the package is nice. Then you also have the primer pocket cleaner that does both the large and the small. Again, a good tool to have, you know, for that $13. But beside that, you get this cutter, which is, you know, works like that cutter. The only thing, what you have to do, this is kind of a all-purpose cutter, and then you buy the right pilot and shell holder for your particular caliber, but they're $6.50 each. You know, so you just got to find the right one that you need, buy that. Then the shell holder goes in here over your brass. You tighten it down. The pilot goes in here. So it can only go with the pilot shoulder, so it can only go to that distance. To me, that's a pretty slick setup for a total of, what, 15, 16, no, maybe about getting close to 20 bucks. But that beats, you know, a lot of this kind of thing. You know, I think I paid 40 or something for that, but I think they're going over 100. Like I've seen some like that, 170, and then you got to buy the pilots, and you know, that gets out of hand. This is a very simple method of doing it, and you can chuck this in a drill to even speed it up. But these cutters, when they're sharp, you know, there's no reason you couldn't just spin that by hand and do it. So it's not a bad setup. I've never used it, but sometime I'm going to have to actually order one in, the right pilot for something, and try it. But I can see no problem with that. I think that would work very well. But your first thing, you know, you're going to be able to load a piece of brass like 5-6 times before you get too long, or a lot of times I've done 10. 10 is kind of a number I use. I can usually, by that time I want to re-anneal them anyway. And then I'll trim them. But part of the deal, like with this tool now, when you're going to reload, if you use this tool every time, it kind of keeps that length in check. But that to me looks like a simple way of doing it. But it'd be interesting to hear from people who have used this system. Now, there's, you know, Lee sells out a bunch of different systems too, but you could just keep running into more and more money. To me, if you're doing a simple reload to make some plinking rounds, this looks like a pretty damn good method of doing it. And like I say, both of these tools are kind of something you need anyway.